Good morning, everybody! Welcome back to The Morning Rant, the show in which I, Alex Racuglia, talk about my life as a TV commercial director and software producer while I telecommute from my home to the office. Today, in the suburbia of Milan, there's a lot of rain, everything is grey. It seems like a London without London. So, nah. But today I want to answer the main question that everybody asked me since 2022. And so, what's the difference between Bitmart 2 and Bitmart Pro, two of my best-selling apps? And today I'm here to answer this question because it's a very frequently asked question. First thing first, 3 days ago, a person another time asked me this question. I always answer trying to be polite and trying to be as clear as possible, describing in 3 lines or 3 sentences what Bitmart does and what Bitmart Pro does. Try to summarize and then send them to the tutorials of Bitmart 2 and Bitmart Pro to understand what the two apps do, because they are focused on two different stuff. But I say to myself, wait, if there's a question in the world, let's ask the Oracle of Delphi. And so I asked ChatGPT. I copy and pasted the text of the two websites, the two web pages of Bitmart 2 and Bitmart Pro, and then I ask ChatGPT, please tell me what are the differences between the two apps, expecting 3 or 2 sentences, and ChatGPT answered with a lot of information that I never thought about. So it's quite interesting to see things from another perspective, even if it's an artificial intelligence, a synthetic intelligence, or a synthetic algorithm. And so I will put all this information in a single web page, and I'll link these web pages in the 2 mini sites. So everybody should stop asking me this question. And I'll try to be as clear as possible. Today, trying reading ChatGPT answer, but the main focus of this video, and it will be a very long one, is to tell you the story behind the two apps, or the 3 apps, because there were Bitmart X before Bitmart 2. Okay? So I asked ChatGPT, and she said, I say that she because in Italy, at least, it's a woman, so ChatGPT is a woman. And ChatGPT, the personal assistant that I developed, has a voice of a woman, of a girl. So for me, all the GPTs are female. So, purpose and functionalities. Bitmart 2 focuses on analyzing audio tracks to generate a timed music marker to Final Cut Pro X. You take the music, it find the beat, mark them with markers, and then send the result to Final Cut Pro. While Bitmart Pro is a more advanced tool that extends beyond the music markers. That's true. It enables automatic music-driven video editing, allowing users to import video clips and arrange them in sync with the beat. That's a lot more. And so, just for this simple argument, for this simple topic, the two apps are very different. You can say Bitmart Pro is a Bitmart version 3. It started with this goal in mind, but then it evolved in something way different. Then editing capabilities. Bitmart 2 allows users to manually manage music markers, including specific time signatures, 3/4 or 4/4. If you're a musician and you understand music, you can say that 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 are the 4 beats. And then if you use 3/4, is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then you can mix them in something like 6/8 or 12/8. But this is way more complex than I'm allowed to do this in this kind of video, simply because I'm not a musician, and so I will say a lot of shit. While Bitmart Pro automatically arranges video clips based on the beat structure of the song and includes option for changing the duration of the music intelligently, ensuring smooth transitions, blah, 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 blah. Then user interface and workflow. Bitmart 2 is a simple UI designed for users who need extract markers and refine music tracks, while Bitmart Pro is a more comprehensive and complex interface, allowing full video sequences. Blah, 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 blah. Export and Final Cut Pro integration. Bitmart 2 exports FCP XML file containing music markers, while Bitmart Pro exports a fully edited video timeline to Final Cut Pro, complete with cut music, placed video clips, and transition, blah, 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 a lot of stuff. And then pricing. Today, Bitmart 2 is priced something like €17.50, while Bitmart Pro, €27.50. And you can say, oh, you're a very stupid person because Bitmart Pro is 10 times more powerful and more complex than Bitmart 2. You should price it a lot higher. That's true, but I want to tell you the story behind these two apps. And so please, because this will be a very interesting story and something that you can tell your children when you will be old. Okay? So let's go. Let's start with this great epic of Alex Racuglia developing one of the most powerful apps ever produced. Everything started something like 12 or 13 years ago, but it started very before, because even using Final Cut Pro, the original one, the classic one, I started using Final Cut Pro with version 2 as a game and with version 3 as a professional product. I always produced a video based on music with the cuts in sync with the music. Everybody said, okay, if you want to do this, you have to put markers and use markers and as guides for cuts. So you play the music and then you hit the letter M in sync, trying to be as precise as possible, like you were a professional drummer. Okay? It started with this, but sometimes I lose a bit. And when I switched to Final Cut Pro 10 FCPX, it was very difficult to be in sync. Okay, maybe I'm not a professional drummer, maybe I lose some beats, but sometimes it happened to be strange because I thought I was better as a performer, as a drummer, as a beat tempo beater. And so I recorded myself and I discovered that there is a lot of delay. You know, something like 2 or 3 frames between the hit of the keyboard and the actual marker. Why? I don't know if there's a problem with the keyboard. I don't know if there's a problem with the system. I don't know if there's a problem with Final Cut Pro. But in fact, even if I was exactly perfect at signing and beating beats, the marker application wasn't in sync. Producing tons of video with music, I started doing this manually. You look at the music, you stop and then beat. Look at the music, stop and then beat, using the waveform. And this way, a 2-minute song will be edited in something like 15 or 20 minutes. Very precisely, eh? And so after the marker definition, editing was quite easy. Piece of cake. Everybody faces it. Okay, I know everybody was doing video editing does this. That was okay, how the things were going. But then I discovered an open source library that does exactly that. You take a waveform, an audio waveform, it analyzes it, and then applies marker. And then I say, okay, maybe I can use it as a starting point to producing an application. At the time, it was 2012. There were no Swift, and so I started developing this app in Macromedia Director. That's true. Using calls to the system shell to get this text and then parsing this text to apply in this marker. I did a lot of reverse engineering for the FCP XML, and at last, 1 year later, it was something like a game for me. I produced the first version of Bitmark and I called it Bitmark X. I think that the name is quite good because Bitmark marked the beats, and X because it was focused on Final Cut Pro X, Final Cut Pro 10. I never put this app in. I never sold this app. It was an internal tool. I wanted to sell this app, but I didn't know how to certify the fact that nobody could grab this app and resell it or use it without paying me a lot of money. It worked, and I tried to be a little stylish. I created this square user interface and everything was still. Then Swift came, and then I started developing command line apps in Swift. And then at a certain point I said, okay, but what about if I want to have a window? Quite easy. In 2014, they launched the Swift. I started using Swift with the Swift 2 point something and actively with Swift 3 in 2016. So I said, okay, let's convert this app, and I translated all the code from the original one written in Lingo with Macromedia Adobe Director. Sorry, I said Macromedia, but because It's so planted in my brain. In Adobe Director, and I switched to Swift. It was quite easy. It took me one day. The app was working. And while I used Swift to produce FCP X Autodac, my first selling app, and I created a way of certifying licenses. It's not perfect, but it works. Then I decided to sell Bitmark, and I produced a video for the promotion. So this is the video you can still see in my YouTube channel. I asked a friend of mine, she's named Keope, to participate and to dance, because I wanted a very, very dance style video inspired by state-of-the-art demo. You can understand the love that I put on this video, the love for this demo, if you are old like me and you lived the demo scene of Amiga back in the day. She asked me, okay, what I can do? I said to her, let's do the truzza. Be a vulgar dancer on a cheap discotheque in Italy. Try to be as funny and a little bitchy. And that's the result. Please go and follow Keope, my friend, on Instagram. She's a performer, she's a dancer teacher, and I think that she's one of the gorgeous and sweetest girl I ever met. I very like her. She was a dance student with my wife. I met her when she was 17, and now she's 30, and it's more than 30. And I really like her because is the sweetest and sexiest person on earth. And so Bitmark X has been launched, and I priced it $2.99. I was so ashamed of the quality of my developing skills that I say to myself, and this is a very, very huge mistake, let's price it low so people will forgive the flaws on the interface or in the behavior of the app. Bad idea. Start higher. But I was younger, I was more shy, very, very, very less confident. It was a very, very, very huge success. 2 times I sold tons, let's say hundreds of licenses in one purchase for the Chinese market. A lot of Chinese people resell your apps, doing a lot of margin because there are a lot of restrictions in China. And so they do the bridge between the Occident and the Orient. It's quite strange. But it worked. It was a very, very useful app. I had a lot of encouragement from the internet. I did a lot of numbers. And then I raised the price from $2.99 to $3.99 and then $4.99 in euro. I became greedy. You know, it's still $5, €5 for something that can save you 15 minutes, 20 minutes. That's okay the first time you purchase it and the first time you use it. That was okay. Then at the end of 2019, I started developing version 2 of Bitmark because I wanted to do more. If the first version of Bitmark simply extracted the markers and saved the markers on a FCP XML in the same folder of the original file, I wanted to add a little more interface after the bit recognition and the bit analysis. And so I created this Bitmark 2. The algorithm was the same, but I added more on the shell. And so the possibility to mark the markers, to sign them 4/4 or 3/4. And that was quite interesting because if you're a musician and Western music is almost always in 4/4, then you can mark the first beat, and then group the beats in group of 4 measures. And so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, again, 1, 2, 3, 4. That creates the usual structure of the music. And so you can mark this marker, marking the first of the first quarter of the measure, and then the first of 4 measure with another color to understand the cycle of the music, the progression of the music. And this way it's quite easy to cut and to make a 3-minute song shorter. And then I added the possibility to cut the music right directly inside the app. I created another video. This time I wanted to do something more after the original one. The original one was monochromatic and it was square and it was okay. I love it. I love the original one, but I wanted to do something more. And then I searched for stock footage, and then I found a lot of footage, and then this was the result. I think that this video is more beautiful, but less impacting than the previous one, because the previous one marked the beat with the flash. Every beat in the video has been flashed. So it was very, 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 very clear that the beats were identified. In the second video, I suppose that the people who bought Beatmark X, Beatmark 1, understand the basic functioning of the app, and this video was targeted to them. You already have Beatmark. This is the new version of Beatmark, and you can do all this stuff more with this new software. That's it. It launched February 2, 2020, 02/02/2020, 2020. It was a palindrome number. It was a success. I have to admit it. It was a very, very big success. As of today, it's the app that I sold more in terms of units. So it was huge. And not only the app performed well the first week or the first month, but it still performs well today. After Beatmark 2, I think that everything was done. I couldn't do more with Beatmark. But the other problem, sometimes beats were not identified correctly. I had the most interesting problem on a dance music track. I am a metalhead, but I love Lady Gaga, and Telephone by Lady Gaga is my favorite song of her. I love Telephone. The telephone, my telephone, it's perfect. When you analyze the track with my app, it identified correctly the first part, but it loses the sync when there's the Beyoncé rap segment. Why? Because it changed tempo. This library tries to identify the tempo of the music at the beginning, using the first 30 or 40 seconds. And then suppose that the music is always at the same tempo. You never listen to something like the Dream Theater, so there's no changing of tempo, time signature. And so I wanted to do something different. In 2021, I started thinking, I have to do something different. And at the time, I was experimenting a lot with machine learning. And so I said, let's say that I want to teach a machine how to recognize the beat. Okay, using machine learning with audio and images, because I wanted to translate audio to images and using convolutional neural network. But it's not. This is not important now. And so I said, okay, I have to produce a lot of training data. How to do training data? I can use Beatmark 2, okay, but maybe I can do something different to train a model to identify beats. And so I started developing a new algorithm. I started a lot of literature, a lot of documentation, a lot of papers for beat identification, even for music that changes tempo. And I wasn't going perfectly. I developed a lot of algorithms combined together to identify moments of beat in music, even if there's a reverb or delays, to identify a right beat. Because I wanted to use this beat to train the machine learning. The result, it was because the beats that I was identifying were beats, but were not beats in the main pattern. If you have a music with tunes, ta, tunes, ta, tunes, ta, it's quite easy to understand that tunes and ta are the main quarters of the music. But if you have something like doom, ta, pa, pa, tam, doom, ta, pa, 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 doom, pa, 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 doom, ta, 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 doom, it's quite different. And my algorithm identified quite well the tumpa, tumpa, tum, all the strange tumpa, but failed to recognize the main pattern. And so I said, fuck it, I will work on something else. And then I forget everything about this. I closed the project. I marked it as a failure. But 1 month later, I had to produce another video with music. Music wasn't the driver of the video. It was a pharmaceutical promotional / tutorial. I alternated 2 or 3 stock footage of clips with 2 or 3 motion graphic clips. So it wasn't something that I have to do on the beat, tunes, 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 tunes. But in these cases, I tried to use the secondary or the tertiary beats to do the cuts. So I can have a secondary visual beat that overlaps the music. In my mind, when I edit music, not on the main quarter, but in the third or in the second, on the fourth, it's something like I doing a different accent from the music. It's okay, and something that I see visually, but it is as I am listening for something like a click in the back of my mind. It's difficult to understand and to explain this, but the take-home message is that I can use visual editing to do audio editing. Okay, I know that it seems strange, it seems preposterous for me, but accept this. I consider the music not considering the first or the third beats, the first fourth or the third fourth, but I use the beats almost independently. And I say to myself, you know what? This is not a music video. This is a promotional video, but I use music as something like a secondary driver to do the edit. I edit on the beats, but the beats are not so relevant. I can choose the first fourth, or the second, or the third, or the fourth. It was not important. It was important that the cut happened at one of these beats. You know what? This is exactly what I did with my algorithm. Let's forget the idea of using artificial intelligence, machine learning. Let's use this algorithm to find beats, not the beats of the music, important beats of the music, and then use these beats, these markers for the editing, independently from the music main pattern. Let's try it. And so I tried. And to try this, I said, okay, I have to put something up. Let's load something like 50 images and then do the editing of the music using these images as an example. And then the epiphany. Oh my God, I did the editing. It was okay. It wasn't perfect, but it was fine. And it did it in 1 minute. You know, 1 minute to perform this editing. I didn't have a beat mark app. I didn't have a beat marker app. I didn't have a beat identifier. I had an app that edited the videos in sync with the music with sense. It was perfect? No, it was fine. Okay, yes. It's something that you can find on YouTube or even in a pharmaceutical congress, and it will be okay with no effort, 0 effort. Just load the clips and everything is fine. And then I pivoted. What started as Beatmark Free became something completely different, Beatmark Pro. The main goal of the app wasn't find the beats. The main goal of the app is edit the clips for you with some resemblance with the beat of the music, period. That is automatic editing driven by the music. That's the statement, that's the payoff of Beatmark Pro. And then I created this video that was the weaker of all the Beatmark videos. I know that. But I think it focused more on the fact that you can edit in sync with the music. And that's it. This was Bitmark Pro. And one night, my wife was abroad, and I was sitting on the couch. It was something like 10 p.m. I had this idea. You have always music that is 2, 3, 4 minutes long. You take the song from Ariana Grande. I don't know why I chose Ariana Grande. And then you have to do a smaller version, something like 1 minute edit or 45 seconds or 30 seconds. And I said, how can I do the automatic editing of the music? I already do the analysis for the beat, and I already have all the information of the audio surrounding the beats, 1 second before and 1 second after. Let's compare every beat with all the other beats to find the most resemblant ones. I have this 1 minute song, and I identified something like 400 beats. Let's compare 400 beats with all the 400 beats. You have a matrix of tens of thousands of combinations. And for all the combination, you can have a value that identifies how much there's a resemblance and identity between one cut and another. And so you can say that the starting at a marker identified 20 seconds from the beginning of the song and a marker identified 2 minutes from the beginning of the song are almost identical. And then you can cut them and then cut everything from 20 seconds to 120 seconds, squeeze everything together, and have a new version of the music much shorter. That's what I did. And today, the automatic shortening of the music is the most used feature for me. I use this feature every day, every time I have to do an audio editing. Today, I do video editing, and then after, when I see the duration of the video, I cut the music. That's it. It works, and it works perfectly. And that's the story behind Bitmart Free. I know that Bitmart Free / Bitmart Pro, it's it's much complex. The interface is very, very complex, forgive me, because I added a lot of stuff that I needed. But it's quite easy. If you follow the first tutorial, you take the music, you change the duration of the music, then you drag clips, and then you click send to Final Cut Pro, and that's it. It's quite easy. That's the reason Bitmart Pro is the most loved app for wedding cinematographers or wedding producers, because it does everything on a snap of a finger. I arrived to my office. It's time to go and do some work. And thanks for watching me. And as always, feel free to comment this video and like this, subscribe to this channel, blah, 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 all the stuff. For me, it's always a pleasure to entertain you and to communicate what I do. I'm not trying to sell my apps. Okay, I'm trying to sell my apps, but I'm trying to communicate what I do, because the behind the scenes is quite important for me to express to produce the things that I do and the mental path that I follow. Thanks for watching me, and as always, ciao.